So I got a chance to get an early viewing of the new documentary called Christspiracy. For those of you who aren't familiar, it's the latest documentary by Kip Anderson, who's the same guy who was involved with Seaspiracy, Cowspiracy, and what the hell. So yeah, I wanted to share my thoughts with y'all. And so I'll be honest, when I first heard about this documentary, I had no idea what they were going for. Like, I thought they had gone off the deep end, you know, making this documentary trying to debunk Christianity, like some Da Vinci Code. I don't know, I was just thinking, wow, that's so weird to go from making documentaries about veganism to religion. So yeah, that was my bad. Turns out it's a documentary that analyzes veganism and religion. And you know, call me a hater or whatever, but I was still like, who is this documentary gonna serve? The people out there saying they still want to eat animals because Jesus said so? Like, are there really that many people out there using that as their main justification for eating meat? And is it really worth making a whole documentary for those people? Like, are there that many people who use that argument who are willing to have a good faith discussion about it? Because I don't know, if I hear someone using the God argument, I'm just like, okay, yeah, this person just wants to eat animals and not think about it. So I was skeptical, okay? Plus, I'm not religious at all. Most of my knowledge about Christianity comes from watching Jesus Christ Superstar on repeat as a kid. I mean, I loved Jesus Christ Superstar. I basically had all the songs memorized. But anyways, they've been hyping up this documentary for a while, you know, saying it's gonna change everything, and they've been really vague about what exactly it is that they're gonna reveal. You know, like the biggest cover-up ever. But I really liked all their other documentaries, so I went into this one with an open mind. And boy, I'm a completely different person now. I know, I'm kidding, but let's get into it. And out of respect for the filmmakers, I don't want to steal their thunder, and since it's not out officially, I'm gonna keep this review spoiler free, mostly. I do really want to talk about the revelation though, so I'll probably make a video about that after it comes out. So let me know in the comments if you'd be interested in that. But I'll probably just make it anyways. So the film opens up with Kip going over his previous documentaries about veganism and how he's extensively covered the environmental and health aspects of eating a plant-based diet, but how he never really tackled the ethical side of it. And at some point during a Q&A session, Kip got asked by someone in the audience, I don't remember the question exactly, but it was something like, how would Jesus kill an animal? So in essence, the question was, what would be a spiritual way to kill an animal? And at that moment, Kip couldn't give an answer. But then that guy came up to him afterwards, they started talking about it, and they decided to work together to answer that question. And so that's our main cast. We've got Kip, who is an atheist, I believe, and Cameron, who's the guy who asked the question, who is a Christian. And I think it's a pretty interesting lens to approach the ethical angle, because for a lot of people, if there were an ethical way to kill an animal, Jesus would probably be doing it. So anyways, that establishes the guiding question of the whole documentary. Is there a spiritual way to kill an animal? And the whole documentary is centered around them trying to figure that out. And it's not just Christianity. They look at a bunch of different religions and philosophies like Christianity. No, like Buddhism, Hinduism, Judaism, Islam. And the first 2/3 of the film is them going through different ones, trying to understand how they justify their killing practices. And there's this huge transition scene between the first 2/3 of the film and the last 1/3 of the film. And actually during the scene, I thought they had lost the plot. Like, I didn't know where they were going with it. But then when they connected it, it makes sense. You'll know what I'm talking about when you see it. But essentially the last 1/3 is where they start unloading the revelations on you. And it's the big payoff of the film. And honestly, it's a very intriguing conclusion. And I've never seen that hypothesis explored at all. And they do a pretty extensive job fleshing it out. And I'll discuss a little bit more my thoughts on the revelations and the consequences of that later on in the video. Anyway, so what I will say is that this documentary is extremely thought-provoking, even if we ignore the conclusion at the end. It makes you think a lot about how the church impacts everyone, even if you don't believe in it, and how religion likely crafted a very early blueprint for justifying our treatment of animals today. You know, like back then, people probably would have had to be a lot closer to the actual brutality of killing animals. And people probably wouldn't have felt so guilty about it if they had thought that it was some divine order or that God was okay with it. Another thing that the film explores that I really liked was that it talks about how eating animals is so embedded in the world that we live in today. You know, most people don't even think about the hypocrisy of loving animals on one hand, but then eating them on the other. It feels like eating animals is woven into every bit of society. And it reminded me of why I feel so passionately about veganism today, because I see it as the biggest moral blind spot of our generation. Like, how can people just walk around saying they're against violence, that they want peace, and mean it, like I believe they truly mean it, and then in the same breath not realize their direct role in violence against animals? Like, they do mention this in the film as well, but it almost feels like The Matrix in a way. And so on that note, I mentioned this in my Pignant review as well, but it makes you feel disgusted at what we do to animals. Like, there's this one scene where they interview this dog rescuer guy who talks about how he saves dogs from dog slaughterhouses for the dog meat trade, and for some reason this scene got a really strong reaction out of me, because they show scenes of dogs strung up, sliced in half, even like their bodies cooked, and it's just nausea inducing. And it reminds you, Jesus Christ This is exactly what we do to other animals. How do we not see the absurdity of killing one and loving the other? In their state of suffering, they look more similar than different. And so even for me, why don't I freak the fuck out when I see a pig in the same conditions? And then right after, they show scenes of these animals being forced into slaughterhouses, and you can see them shaking, and all you can think of is, how can we do this to other beings? Like, what is wrong with us? Anyways, and so like I mentioned, the first 2/3 of the film, going through different religions and examining their different humane kill methods. And they show you kosher, and it's like, well, that seems excessively cruel. And they show you halal, and you're like, okay, that also seems excessively cruel. And then he goes to this farm in the US, and I think it was well known for being humane. I don't remember exactly, but it really highlights how psychotic some of these people sound, saying these methods of humane killing are humane at all. Like, it's fucking crazy. Like, there's this one scene at the farm where this guy working there says, oh, I'm gonna stun the rabbit. So he grabs the rabbit by the legs and smacks them on the head. And then Kip asks, like, what do you mean by stunning? And then the guy goes, oh, stunning them means now they're not feeling anything. And then as soon as he says that, the rabbit starts shaking their legs while they're still in his hands. So clearly not unconscious, their eyes are wide open. And he goes, oh, I must have messed up. And he smacks them again. Like, again, these people sound psychotic. How could you possibly tell yourself with a straight face that that animal's not feeling anything? They also bend over backwards to not say kill. They'll say harvest or reduce the number of hawks. It's just ridiculous the lengths that people will go to not face the reality of what they're doing. You're killing animals, dude. And yeah, these parts are hard to watch. It's just the insane cruelty that people will commit and then convince themselves that what they're doing is fine. Because I mean, obviously no one thinks that they are the bad guy. And like, this stuff is also clearly disturbing. Like, a lot of the times I was sitting there thinking, damn, I've got good friends that I wish would watch this. Like, how is this possible? How can good people continue to be willfully ignorant? Anyways, on a lighter note, the people who made this love Kanye West. I straight up counted 5 Kanye West songs in this. I'm not even exaggerating, I'll name them. Jesus Walks, Salah, On God, No Church in the Wild, and Closed on Sundays. And so a lot of them were from the gospel album that he launched. And it actually got me to listen to it for the first time. Because when it came out, I was like, I'm not gonna listen to this gospel stuff. That ain't me. I mean, I loved Jesus Christ Superstar. There's also this pretty good scene where he's interviewing these Buddhist monks, and holy shit, it is cringe. It's good, but it's cringe. Like, they're talking about how they're super strict about never killing animals. And I was like, oh sweet, I didn't realize Buddhists were all vegan or vegetarian. And then they start giving different excuses of circumstances where they would eat meat and like why those circumstances are different. But anyways, he exposes them. Like, he catches one guy in his BS. I felt like I was watching Jeremy get exposed on Love is Blind season 6. Also, something that's kind of funny is that this is a classic Kip Anderson film. Like, there's a lot of typical Kip Anderson isms. Like, at this point, I feel like he's messing with us. For example, you know, he goes and asks clearly unqualified people difficult questions, and when they can't answer him, he goes, suspicious. Why wouldn't they want to talk about that? Like, he had to be joking, because at one point he emails the Dalai Lama, and when he doesn't reply, he goes, why would the Dalai Lama ignore me? Right? Like, you wouldn't expect them to get back to you, right? I mean, maybe I'm out of the loop. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he should have expected a reply. I don't know. I do have a few criticisms though. So I felt at some parts the revelation felt a little bit rushed. Like, at the end, they just drop everything on you. It's a lot. And as someone who doesn't know all the characters in the Bible, I got lost sometimes when they were talking about different people. Like, are there 2 Peters? But yeah, like I said, mostly it's just a lot to take in. And I feel like I need to watch it more than once just to wrap my head around it, especially because I feel like they just rapid fired at the end. Or maybe I'm just dumb. Also, there were some parts that had me raising my eyebrows. Like, they interviewed a couple people who made claims that had me going, is that for real though? And in those cases, it wasn't really relevant to the revelation. But I was like, yeah, I think I'm gonna Google that one. One thing I do have to call out though is that there is some gross vegan washing of Israel at the end, which I found disappointing and unnecessary. And honestly, I think really dumb of them to include, because that certainly hurts the documentary, and I could see people not recommending it just because of that, especially given the ongoing massacre. So do I think it's gonna have the impact they say it's gonna have? That's a tough one. I can see why it's controversial. And if I think about a place like Latin America, I can see it being extremely controversial. On the other hand, I think just by the nature of what they're talking about, you know, looking at religious texts, extremely old documents, talking to different experts, it's much harder to definitively prove anything. And you don't really know how credible their sources are. You know, it's not like Cowspiracy or What the Hell, where they can pull data and stats to convince you. At the end of the day, it's the word of them and their experts against the established word. I think it's great what they conclude is on the table for people to discuss, for sure. But like I was mentioning earlier, I don't know if the people who are desperately hanging on to religion as an excuse to eat animals are going to be open to the message. But honestly, even if their conclusion isn't correct, I would say it doesn't matter because the buildup of the documentary is really moving and impactful regardless. Like, I haven't stopped thinking about the documentary, and I think it was an extremely interesting perspective, and I'm glad they made it. So despite my criticisms, I think it's definitely worth a watch. You can tell a lot of effort went into it, and I hope it has the impact that they intended for it to have. So thanks for watching, y'all, and if you haven't, check out my review of Pignorant. As always, don't forget to take your B12 supplement, eat your legumes, and a big shout out to my patrons for helping make videos like these possible.